right, so Steven Spielberg needs no introduction, especially from a peasant like yours truly. So I'm going to skip the monologue about how wonderful he is because we all were raised by him at some point or another, whether it be Jaws, Jurassic Park, or Indiana Jones, my personal favorite from his filmography. Then can't forget the greatest hits, Minority Report, Artificial Intelligence doesn't get spoken about enough. I really like Warhorse. I really like Bridge of Spies. I love his Lincoln. I think the guy just doesn't really miss often. Wasn't a big fan of Ready Player One, but that could just be my bias towards the book itself. That being said, Mr. Steven Spielberg at the age of 79 and John Williams at the age of 94. Two old heads who have made magic and have both raised us as fathers. They've co-parented together, basically. They have created magic throughout the decades in many, many ways, in many different genres. These guys, these men, are at the top of their class, and one would argue some of the best, if not the best, in their field. So again, even though I tried to avoid the monologue, I give it to you anyways. That is to say, I've watched Disclosure Day, and while I haven't read reviews in depth, again, I tend to do that after my reviews, I will say that the word of mouth has been very divisive. I've even heard people comparing this to Backrooms. Did we not learn anything from my Passenger review? I think it's really crazy that when a movie does well, it's to the detriment of the existence of other films. Sure, I get not liking movies, not being your certain movies not being your cup of tea, but not liking a movie because another movie is better is almost an incoherent train of thought that I don't get it. I don't understand. And it's not, hey, pop off. But I just don't understand. A movie can be bad just because it's bad, and a movie can be good just because it's good. It's an interesting thought experiment, especially with the success of Backrooms and Obsession. But it's crazy that now that conversation also includes films made by Steven Spielberg himself, someone that even these young filmmakers themselves have absolutely loved, adored, and grew up watching. So it's really interesting to see the difference between just genuine critique of a movie and toxic fandom. And I can't believe that Steven Spielberg, a film by Steven, is even part of that kind of conversation, but I digress. I watched Disclosure Day, and I'll tell you the truth. I really, really like this movie for a myriad of reasons, none of which are ones that I thought before seeing would be the prominent reasons for me liking it. This movie does so many things right. If you're a fan of going down these rabbit holes of UFO, UAP, non-biologics, and biological entities, like this kind of stuff is, for me at least, and I know a lot of you, really interesting. Not just as subject matter for a movie, but as subject matter in general. One of my most recent reads is actually this book, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs Imminent, written by Luis Elizondo, who's someone who's worked for the Pentagon for over 35 years, including Special Forces, and many other classified operations, private sectors. He's heavily involved in a lot of the things that we speculate on existing. And he wrote this book post 2023, which is when this disclosure stuff really started happening in the States, here in the US. And I dove as hard as I could and as deep as I could, that's what she said, into this kind of reading material. And for many, many years, it's fascinated me. So I think that for the enthusiast like me who really loves this kind of stuff, remote viewing, archival footage, speculation of the things that do and don't exist, reverse engineering UFO technology, even the I guess you could say the UFO UFO technological race between Korea, Russia, and the US. I mean, the history is there for you to read up on, and I think it's real history. Call me crazy. Call me the mad. Call me the mad rancher that lives off in the wilderness with two dogs and tinfoil hats. But I really believe in this stuff. And I know a lot of you do, or else stuff like this wouldn't exist. Books like that wouldn't sell. And I'd like to talk about that book a little bit more in depth. I think, and I know this is a review for Disclosure Day, but part of the fascination of me reviewing movies isn't simply just reviewing it. It's a good movie or it sucks. It's also, these are people who make films with passions for telling stories. And Steven Spielberg has been someone who's been telling stories on UFOs for decades now. I saw a post on Instagram that was actually really kind of put it together for me. This is this is the third chapter in his unofficial UFO trilogy with E.T., Close Encounters, and this. And it makes sense. It really does make sense. This man has had a fascination. And for me, part of the joy of reviewing movies and understanding other people's vision of this stuff is, where did that fascination come from? Why are you telling the story? What is your intention behind telling the story? And I think there's a lot of intention in the story. And, when I was reading the book Imminent, which I do in a lot of ways recommend, but I also don't. Luis Elizondo is someone who went through a lot of paperwork and a lot of hoops to get that book legally published. He uses a lot of lingo and a lot of verbiage, and there's a lot of blackout redactions in this book, which is apparent. He was certainly walking a fine line between what he could and could not say. So to some extent, a lot of what's in this book is carefully chosen and catered to so that he doesn't get in any real trouble while scathing the lines. So it is kind of a frustrating read, because anytime you feel like he's about to say something, there's a paragraph that is either redacted or he goes, I can't go there. And you're like, you son of a bitch, this is why I'm reading your book in the first place. So while is it a frustrating read, it is still one read that I would recommend, regardless of how you may feel about Luis Elizondo. But to my point, I think there's a lot of unique voices, especially now in the UFO community. And it's awesome to see a director like Steven Spielberg pick apart and tell a story about something that I think in a lot of ways is niche, and I think in a lot of ways is kind of a hard thing for people to admit they find a fascination in. I think UFOs, conspiracy theorists, which I don't think conspiracy theorist is the word anymore because it's no longer conspiracy, but I feel like in a lot of ways people feel like they'll get ridiculed for talking about this stuff, and it's really refreshing to see a big name director like him pick at a niche subject like UFOs. And usually, this subject matter is regulated to indie films, cosmic horror films by indie directors who don't really touch this kind of stuff after. I mean, we did have Denis Villeneuve's The Arrival, which was fantastic, but we haven't really had a banger UFO movie since Independence Day. And all the other movies that Roland Emmerich has made involving aliens have just not really pondered any deep, real questions. They've just been like Moonfall, which is like the most comic book ass sci-fi movie about aliens you will ever watch. It was so many questions that they could have really taken apart and explored in a very haunting and deep manner, and they just chose to give us Fast and Furious on the moon in the same way that Fast and Furious gave us Fast and Furious in outer space in Fast 9. So that's just to say that there's not a lot of smart alien themed movies, and this feels like it's almost there. And I say almost because Steven does a lot of heavy lifting, presenting questions without necessarily answering any of them. And I think that goes due to the PG-13 rating, this still being very much a family film. As we know, Steven Spielberg is definitely a family-centric, focused director. He brings the goods, and some are blockbusters. He brings the goods to family films. He brings the humor, and he skates the line and PG-13 violence, as shown by Temple of Doom. And many of the Indiana Jones movies, actually every single Indiana Jones movie, has a point in time where I go, how the fuck? And the only way he got away with it is because he is, in fact, Steven Spielberg. And of course, I believe Temple of Doom was the reason why we created the PG-13 rating. So Steven has definitely been someone who flirts with family entertainment and violence. That being said, this movie presents a lot of questions that I think are valuable, strong questions, but it also moves at such a breakneck pace that it's hard to sit down and ponder those questions until after the movie. Hell, I'm going to have to do a spoiler and non-spoiler review for this in the same video. So this is going to be my non-spoiler for the most part. And then I will lean into the spoilers and I will give you a warning so you can dawdle off with the UFOs yourself and find those answers with Steven Spielberg at a theater. And then you can come back and then ponder the rest of these questions with me in the spoiler section. So, but I will give you a warning. As primarily I want to spoil the ending because there's a lot that I want to talk about in those and some of the character moments. But did I like this movie? I certainly fucking did. I think this is a true to form Steven Spielberg movie. I don't. One of my fears was that I was going to walk into this movie and sense that there was a sense of him mimicking himself, trying to recapture himself, and I don't feel like at any point Steven Spielberg was not confident in the story or in the way that he was shooting this movie. I think that this is very much Spielberg, not necessarily in top form, but nonetheless in Spielberg form. I really did enjoy the main protagonists of this film, of which there are two main leads, but there are really three stories intertwining towards a climax. For you guys who I'm sure already know, but I'll pretend that you don't. A movie just follows a guy who is trying to let the world know that aliens exist, and he has all the footage and all the documents, over 79 years worth of it, that he can just expose on the internet. And that is his plan: expose it on the internet, expose it to the news, and let us know, like, hey, we are not alone. Now, parallel to that story is another story following Emily Blunt's character, who, like him, there is a blocked off memory that they both share, but they have no recollection of. We can all probably figure out why they can't remember. And part of the story is them figuring out that. I do think that there's a little bit of inconsistency and a little bit of deceptive marketing maybe for some people. I don't think it was completely on purpose. I think the trailer was just cut to show something grandiose and powerful and something exciting to get asses in seats. There's no way you can cut the trailer to truly depict what this movie is about without spoiling it. But I would divide this movie into two parts. While the disclosure element is a very important part of the movie, it really bookends the film. It's the middle section that becomes something a little bit more personal and intimate towards our main character's journey, both together. And it doesn't give away with the idea of disclosure, but in order for this disclosure narrative thread to be completely realized, this second act has to be seen to completion, if that makes sense. So there is a moment where the movie kind of disconnects itself from the very title that alludes to the very purpose this movie even exists, if that makes sense. But I still didn't feel like it was unwarranted. I did enjoy that part of the film, but I do feel that the movie could have easily been maybe 20 minutes shorter, significantly shorter. But it wouldn't be a Steven Spielberg film if he wasn't fucking around with run times. If you've seen Bridge of Spies, or if you've seen Ready Player One, or if you've seen a menagerie of his movies, they all tend to be over 2 hours long. That's just what you get when you're a big name like him. So, fuck it. Spielberg is gonna Spielberg. That being said, I think a good chunk of this movie could have been tightened up a bit, at least for my viewing pleasure. Just so that I don't have that moment when I'm sitting in the seat and I go, oh, right, we got to disclose the shit. That's still a thing that needs to get solved. Granted, the third act of this movie is my favorite part of the film, and it's a very emotionally anchoring moment. what they do and how they get to this point and how they finally get to uh, accomplish what it is that they're trying to do is such a well realized moment with such a heavy emotional impact. The way that only Steven can really do in a summer blockbuster reminds you that, hey, even though we're here for the laughs, the thrills, and the explosions, we're still here primarily for the heart of it. And that was very touching. And I ain't even gonna lie, I got a little soft. My eyes got a little watery. And I think it was just because of watching a project this big from a name that big tell such a grounded and human story, because regardless of what the trailer leads you to believe, it's actually more grounded than I ever thought it would have been. And that's why I would say maybe taper your expectations a bit to the kind of craziness that you're probably expecting to see in this movie, because I don't think that it's going to live up to what you're expecting. But what you're getting in return is a much more human and emotional story. This isn't necessarily an action movie, although there is action in it. It's not just an adventure movie, even though there is adventure in it. It's much more a drama with sci-fi elements involved, although there are two really standout action sequences. And one scene that I thought was extremely creative, that was one of my favorite set pieces in the movie. And oh my god, John Williams' score. Holy fucking shit. My man is 94 years old. Think about that. My man is 94 years old. And while I won't walk out of this movie going, oh, that theme hit the same way Indiana Jones theme hits, and nothing, I don't think, will ever hit the way Indiana Jones theme hits. I still walked out going, this score does something for the movie that only Mr. Williams could ever do, because he just has such an understanding of the golden age of cinema, and to implement that into a space where scores in films are seriously lacking identity. There's no question when his shit plays, you go, that's Mr. John. That's Johnny. Now, Mr. Spielberg is in fact a 79-year-old man. So expect some of his humor to be in line with some of the older filmographies. And that's okay. I still got a good few chuckles out of me. Wyatt Russell was in this movie, and he was the comic relief. One of my complaints is that he disappears halfway through the movie. And he was somewhat of a good comic relief, and I really enjoyed him. The villain here is very villainy, but I will say that the charm of his performance was so good. You just feel like he has a mission he has to accomplish and will accomplish it no matter what. This film's vibes and aesthetic are very much somewhat Minority Report meets Close Encounters. Say what you will about a 79-year-old man, his vision for kinetic filmmaking is really wonderful, really interesting, and I'd love to see him make a straight-out action horror movie or slash hyphen where he uses all of his skills as a filmographer and as someone who understands camera movement. I would love to see him go all out batshit crazy, because he still has it. There's a couple of impressive shots and a couple of impressive one takes. He moves the camera a lot. Instead of just transitioning with a cut, he'll transition with movement. This isn't in any way, shape, or form my favorite movie by him. It's always going to be the Indiana Jones franchise through and through, no matter what. But this is another win for him. This is absolutely another win. It's a movie that asks questions but doesn't go very far into answering them, I'm assuming in order to prevent any real backlash from going too deep into controversial subjects involving theology. Nonetheless, I appreciated him asking these questions. The action sequences, while few and far in between, are there, and they're pretty impressive for the most part. And the sci-fi elements are the best thing about him, because they're grounded enough to where this doesn't feel like conspiracy anymore. And he knows where to hold, suppress, and then finally release that towards the third act. And the third act was just cinema. Absolute cinema. That third act made me love that movie. So when I say like, I'm speaking on the first two acts. When I say love, that was earned because of that third act. and the John Williams score. It's not a perfect movie. A lot of the humor doesn't hit, some of it does. And a lot of the characterization is by the numbers, but it's incredibly performed, and it's just a fun summer blockbuster at the end of the day. That is my consensus on this film. Now, it's time for the spoiler review. So, this is your time to be abducted or dawdle off. Watch the movie and then come back so that you can appreciate my spoiler commentary with all the knowledge you require to tell me that I'm either agreeable or wrong. So, without further ado, the spoiler review begins now. The third act of this movie is the completion of a race towards the finish line. Our main characters have finally reached the broadcast studio where Emily Blunt works, and all of the footage is uploaded. All of the alien UFO proof is finally out there for the world to see. The build-up to this scene, from the private sector outside trying to stop them from broadcasting, to all the people inside going along, almost not fully understanding or grasping what's about to happen, but serious sense that all of these characters know that this has to happen, to the moment that everything is brought out and it finally happens and everyone sees this footage. It's such an incredibly orchestrated sequence that it had my eyes watering from just like the sense of awe of watching a movie like this with so much love put behind it. So often I'm used to watching summer blockbusters where the director and the writers are clearly just there for the paycheck and they know that they're going to fill seats, and Steven Spielberg could have absolutely just filled seats because it's Steven Spielberg. But this was clearly something that he loves. This was clearly something that he's dug decades into exploring, and I'm sure he knows way more than any of us will ever figure out because of his connections and his influence. And if what I saw in the film is any real indication, he probably has seen a lot of the declassifieds firsthand, or maybe even some classifieds, who knows. But if you look at some of the archival footage that was released in the movie, right, in canon, if you have read any of the declassifieds or eyewitness reports, a lot of that stuff, every single one of his sequences call to, and if you remember, and if you have good recollection of these things, especially in the last couple of years, you will recognize that some of the dramatizations and some of the shots and some of the pieces of footage that are shown are in fact real things that people have seen and experienced. And it was just such a cool moment to go, sure, like no one who digs into this will think much of it except, wow, that is crazy. Like the footage looks crazy. It looks real. It looks like it's going to shake the world if it happens in real life. But for some of the people out there like myself who read into this stuff, you go, holy shit, he had a lot of faith in the audience that there would be half a dozen people in there, maybe more, who read up on this stuff and will recognize that those are dramatizations of things that have been eyewitness accounted for. And I just thought it was so incredible, that attention to detail. That was really impressive. The way that all these characters get come together towards the end, this culmination of good, this culmination of ideologies, of people wanting to keep this a secret, of people wanting to expose it, of people who have faith finally willing to open up to the idea of hearing the truth and willing to adjust their belief systems, not completely let them go, but to adjust, but willing and being willing to listen. Like, all that was there in the third act. Everyone was sat experiencing this, and I thought that was just such a powerful moment. There's a scene with all the nuns that are connected to one of the lead characters that are just sitting in front of the screen holding their crosses, but still very much with hope, willing to understand and adjust their worldviews. I thought that was a really cool message. Now, granted, in real life, the private sector would have killed these people first chance they get. I mean, these people would be dead 12 times over in the movie. But it's a PG-13 film, so they certainly wouldn't have crossed that line. And I won't hold it against it because it wasn't trying to tell that kind of story. And the reason that a lot of the proposing of questions but not answering bothered me is because it was always just with a light of hope. And while I do think that that is probably the kind of message that Spielberg wants to end with. I do think that if you're going to propose these questions and tell a grounded story about consequence of knowledge and who decides what and what people should and should not know, I feel like maybe you should consider the bad, people's negative reactions to it. But again, the movie was already 2 hours and 25 minutes, and I don't think that was the kind of story that Spielberg was trying to tell. I just think that my fascination with this kind of subject matter does bring me to wish upon certain things that I did not get from this movie, but I met this movie on its terms. I see what Spielberg was trying to do with the message of hope, and he ended the movie with a simple word: listen. At the very end, Emily Blunt and everyone in the world watching this is confronted with an actual alien subject, like an actual gray alien, big tall motherfucker with joint issues because he aged out, I guess. But what I thought was really cool about the scene is that when people were finally able to confront this gray man in front of, in front of the cameras, in front of millions of billions of people, this alien walked over to Emily Blunt, whispered something in her ear, and when she went back and stood in front of the camera, she said, listen, and the movie ends right there. And I can see where people will have an issue or feel unsatisfied. But I think that the idea of Spielberg telling us how to feel and how to respond is probably not what he wants to lean into. But the idea of ending the movie on the simple word of listen says a lot more than an entire monologue and showing us what this did to the world. So while a part of me would have loved to have seen, the aftermath of this, I don't think anyone could really get a satisfying answer. I don't think that he himself could have come up with a satisfying ending to satisfy everyone. And by doing that, I don't think his message would have come across, which is listen. Just listen. Everyone has the right to decide for themselves if this is the kind of reality that we want to live in. If we're willing to understand, it should not be up to private sectors and to the government and to all these reverse engineering assholes who are using this technology to gaslight us into fucking war. Now, if you watched the documentary Sleeping Dog, which follows a journalist named Jeremy Corbell's, huge in the UFO community. He has so much information, so much classified information on UFOs right now. And he is he's kind of a controversial subject. A lot of people try to discredit him, but there is no denying that he has all the proof necessary to really blow the lid off of this UFO stuff. If you watch stuff like that, you know how real this stuff is. And if you've watched that, then you know about the reverse engineer projects that are happening, the human trafficking operations that happen where children and pilots and adults are used in order to find ways of circumventing this technology using neurological pathways that maybe other children are privy to because they have, a level of innocence that allows them to be more susceptible to things like this, or people who have certain selective brainwaves, or people who have special abilities like remote viewing. All this stuff is in those documents, and you read up on those and you hear about just how horrible these things really are and how crazy and in depth and how many lies have been told throughout the decades, and you really start to get a full picture. Not the complete picture, but you're able to put together a reality within a reality underneath the reality, right? We call a reality a simulation all the time, and not in sense of, oh, this isn't real. But when you think about simulation, right? A fabrication of something. Everything is a fabrication of something. Instagram, people's perception of people is a simulation. Girls wearing makeup, guys finding the right angles, and taking gym pictures, influencers posting, big money lives, broadcast news telling you a story that isn't true. All of these things are examples of simulation. And when you gather all of these conspiracies and all of these military professionals who have been quiet about the subject for decades and are finally able to talk about it without the full fear of having, the full wrath of private sectors coming down on them and killing them or ending their lives or harassing their families. But when you sit back and you listen in the same way that Emily Blunt's character is asking us to do at the very end of the movie, then it is genuinely the first step in breaking through the dishonesty and all of the rhetoric that comes with who's right and who's wrong based on whose ideologies and ideas. At the end of the day, the truth of our universe is something that we should all know. And I love that someone like Steven Spielberg is going out of his way to talk about it. So, granted, I like this movie because of the subject matter that it's touching. I like the movie because of the questions that it ponders. And I genuinely really love the execution of the last act of this movie. It's not a perfect film by any means, but if you like this kind of shit and you really enjoy it and you really dig it, there is so much to enjoy and love about this movie that, frankly, if it's not liked by certain people and it's torn down by people, I don't think Spielberg was trying to make that movie for them. I think that he is a nerd for this stuff, and I think that he was certainly searching for those who are nerds about this as much as he is. So it'd be interesting to see the discourse in this movie. I don't see why it's super controversial, but I always surprise myself when I go online, read reviews, and find people try to find controversy or implement it where there really shouldn't be any. But I'm just one guy with one opinion. So anyway, thank you guys for listening to this very long review. Right now it's clocking in at 41 minutes, and when I edit it, I'm sure it'll be a little shorter, but not by much. So thank you guys for listening all the way through. I appreciate it genuinely. I am humbled and grateful that you would even sit back and spend your relaxation time with my fucking mug talking about aliens and Spielberg. I hope I brought some fun to your Friday night or whenever the fuck you watch this. And I'll see you for tomorrow's review. And as always, I will see you at the movies or in a spacecraft where we're both abducted.